Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is Greg Postman. I am the Vice Chair of the Board of Commissioners, sitting in for Francie Jacober, who's in Denver testifying today. And we've got a busy work session, and I think we're just going to jump right into it. The first is the big question that's on everybody's mind regarding calculation of future property taxes as it relates to recent property valuations. And Ann Driggers is here, and Deb Bainsberger is here, and take it away.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. We are here to talk today about the topic du jour, home valuations and what it means for property taxes. So with me today I have a number of people involved in the whole process. Deb Bainsberger, the assessor, who values all the properties in Pitkin County. Naju Belmont, the Chief Deputy Treasurer, who's responsible for the property tax bills. Liz Woods, Finance Director, responsible for the mill levy calculations, which you determine as part of the budget process. And we have here Connie Baker, the Budget Director. So this is the entire team that kind of works together from the beginning, soup to nuts.
And we got Larry.
Hi. So we wanted to provide some background on how we actually get from home valuations to property taxes, the whole process that it entails. And so if it's okay with you, we'd like to start at the beginning. And today is kind of a big day, or yesterday I should say, regarding home valuations. So
Great. Please do. I just want to make sure your microphone is in the right place. I can see Andorra coming to check.
Yeah, that's good.
okay, that's better.
Yeah,
Okay.
point it at your.
Yeah.
Okay, that's better. Thanks.
So start at the beginning. Property tax basically is an ad valorem tax that's based on the assessed value of an item, such as real estate or personal property. And it is the most common type of ad valorem tax, widely used throughout the nation. And it is authorized under state statute that the Board of County Commissioners can levy taxes against the valuation of taxable property located in a county. So that's your authorization for
For
it.
the public, would you define ad valorem?
It's basically property tax. It means it's a tax on the value of property.
So it's add your value,
You're right,
valorem.
ad valorem, yeah.
Okay.
It's a
Latin, just so the public
word
understands.
equivalent of property tax. So property tax is a relatively stable source of revenue for the county. And there's been quite a few additional pieces of legislation regarding property taxes and how it's calculated. And this morning you'll have seen another one kind of come across everybody's desks. But the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, TABOR, is one that's being used, widely throughout Colorado. And that requires that all tax increases must be approved by the electorate. So all the taxes we talk about today have been approved by the electorate. So the property tax is essentially a tax on the community or district as a whole, in the sense that the value of your property is just used to determine your share of the tax. So the taxes are decided by the board of districts or the county. They realize how much they need, and then they create a levy which spreads it out amongst all of the property owners within the district or the county. So really it's just a share of your total tax on the community. And this is how the actual calculation works. And from this I want to show that the valuation is just one piece of the calculation, and there are many other pieces of it that will affect what the property taxes will end up being. So you start with your actual value, and then an assessment rate will be applied to it, and Deb will talk about that in a little bit. But that's a percentage dependent upon a classification set by the state. That's applied to your actual values, which gives the assessed values. Then the tax rate is the levy that's imposed by the county or the districts, and that gives you your property tax. So at this point, we only know the actual values. We don't still know our assessment rates necessarily. They may change for future years. We don't know our tax rates, so we don't really know what our property taxes are going to do at this point.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? I know some people have been receiving what appears to be a tax bill with a tax rate.
Projection.
And that's just a projection.
Yeah.
So it's not to be taken as fact yet. Is that correct? What you got in the mail, if somebody receives something in the mail, they think they know what their tax is going to be. Looking at that, is that correct? Or is it, that's the projection?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Okay.
The notice of value.
Notice of value.
The notice of value is only the value with the actual value on it.
Okay.
It doesn't have any, this is your estimated property tax, because we don't even know where that begins yet.
No.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
So this calendar, you can see there's a lot of detail in here. I think I just want to explain that we are here May 2nd. This is just the beginning of the process. There are many steps to go through before we actually know what our property taxes are going to be. So those include the whole protest and appeals process, which Deb will talk about in a second. And then she provides the certification of values to all of the districts and the county. And then the finance departments use that information and put it in their budgets to help determine what the mill levies will be. And then eventually the Board of County Commissioners or the districts, boards or municipalities, councils and so forth will approve the mill levies that they need to provide revenue to meet their budget. And then once that happens, which is December 15th for yourself, then all of those are collected by the Treasurer's Office, and then the tax bills are sent out in January. So it's a long process, and we're just right at the beginning of determining what those bills will be in January. So I'm going to pass it over to Deb now to talk a little bit about the notice of valuations that have just been sent out.
Okay, thanks, Ann. So yesterday, May 1st, the notices of valuation were mailed out to every single real property owner. And today, our phones are ringing because the values did go up. The month of May and the first week of June, we will accept appeals, protests from the taxpayers. And then the last 3 weeks in June, we have to finish up making our decisions. And then June 30th, we will actually mail out the notices of valuation or notices of determination to all these people who actually protested. On June 15th, notices of valuation are mailed out to every personal property owner, which is different than real property. And so we kind of are commingling protests at this point. Real property revaluation is calculated using comparable real estate sales that occurred between January 1st of 21 and June 30th of 22. The assessor only updates values on affordable housing. APSHA actually sets those values. We do not. All we do is enter the data that they give to us. And I just wanted to make that clarifying because people think that we make up those values also, and we do not.
Can I ask a question about that?
Please.
I have an APSHA property, but I get my valuation from the assessor. So you're telling me you get the information from APSHA and then send me the value?
I
from your
believe
office?
you're not deed restricted.
Yeah, I am.
Oh, you are? Well, then your value comes from APSHA.
I'll talk to you about it, because I've
Okay.
never received a valuation from APSHA.
Okay.
Now, Deb, did you just say, just the last line on that, APSHA property owners may protest their values with the assessor? I thought I heard you say the opposite. The assessor does not value them, but
But
if
we
there's
will
a
still
protest.
accept, we will still
Okay.
accept a protest.
Great, thanks for
And we
clarifying
will,
that.
go through it with every bit of information that they provide us with, and then they have to have something from APSHA also saying that, yes, maybe you guys should look at this. It's a little bit more of a process, and I suppose Larry could maybe explain that a little better, because he's done this many times.
Yeah, you'd have to come up if you're going to. And
Kelly,
then
I
Kelly had
saw-
a question also.
Yeah, I saw you.
So the question is APSHA values, and your question regarding your property. So APSHA values are typically provided to us by APSHA, and so as Deb said, we entered those based on the allowable resale price that is set by APSHA. In Patty's case, I think you are designated RO,
So we don't have that set
so
cap?
you don't have a set cap as far as what the property can sell for. Your property can sell for anything so long as it's sold to a qualified buyer, but there's no set limit on the values. And so those values do come from the assessor's office based on sales in your neighborhood. But if it's category 1 through 4 deed restricted property, those values come from APSHA.
Yeah, our deed restriction came about prior to categories. I mean, that's how old our deed restriction is, so we're different.
Not you though, right?
No, yeah, yeah, not me, just the deed restriction. Yeah, thanks, Larry.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Kelly.
no, Larry just clarified, because no one's gonna get anything from APSHA. The data is provided by APSHA, and it's still sent from the assessor's
Right.
office.
And if somebody chooses to appeal, they certainly can. They have the right to appeal. But we would probably default to the value or work with APSHA to verify that the value that we have assigned is correct and go
So
with
if
that.
somebody were to make an appeal on an APSHA property, they need to get with APSHA before they bring it, the
And bring
appeal
us
to the
something from
assessor.
APSHA that says this is an error, it should be blank.
It's good that people know that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I just want to clarify again for the public that with the notice of valuation, there's, again, they will not know what their tax is. They're just protesting the valuation, not the tax amount at this time.
Yes.
Can I dig in on that? Like, I thought there was a requirement for an estimated tax. Is that not applicable to home rule counties?
No, the state said if we sent out what's called the long form notice of valuation, we had to put an estimate of taxes.
Okay,
But because we used the little postcard, it was not required.
thank you.
Interesting.
Okay, interesting. Any other questions
No,
before we
thanks,
continue?
thanks.
Okay, thanks, Larry.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, so protests begin. Actually, they started this morning. We started receiving some protests. They can be mailed, emailed, faxed, or delivered in person. Information can be found by calling our office or visiting our website, www.pickingcounty.com/assessor. And that website contains an appeal guide with a protest form, information on how to file a successful appeal, how to protest your value, a comparable sales section. You can go in and find your section of Pickett County, and then you can narrow it down to if it's a condo or a residence or a vacant land, and you can see the sales that we used to come up with our values. And again, they're from January 1st of 21 through June 30th of 22. So the appraisers have already started working on protests today, and this goes through June 8th. No protests can be accepted after June 8th, and they must be postmarked by June 8th. This is different than previous years. It used to be the end of May, the last working day of May. The state extended it by a week, but they did not extend the time that we get to work on them by a week. So we're
No,
going to be
that's
frantically scrambling to get things completed in a timely manner. So June 9th through the 25th, they will continue working on the protests and either approving them or denying them. And on June 30th, all protests must be approved or denied, and notice of determinations at that point will be mailed out to all the real property owners, letting them know whether they've been approved or denied. Those that have been denied may then go the next step by filing an appeal with the County Board of Equalization, or what we call CBOE.
Great.
So that information is all available right now?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay, wow, that's great. I don't know if we've done that in the past, but I like that transparency. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. What's next?
So, July 1st, taxpayers that have been denied can file an appeal through the County Board of Equalization, and that is not through the assessor's office. That is through the manager's office, and that Julia Ely will be the contact person there. And July 3rd, CBOE, County Board of Equalization protest begins. The assessor's office will represent and defend the value that we have set, and then there will be hearing officers that the county hires to mediate. So it will be between the taxpayers and the assessor's office with a hearing officer, and the hearing officer will actually be the person that makes the decision whether to approve or deny this next step. The deadline for filing a County Board of Equalization, CBOE, real property appeal is July 17th. And this is when the assessor reports the total assessed value to the County Board of Equalization. And the deadline for filing an appeal for personal property with CBOE is July 20th. Oh, and the CBOE hearings for real property and personal property begin on the same day, which is July 3rd. And August 7th, actually it should be August 8th because the 7th is on a Sunday, I believe, is the end of County Board of Equalization, CBOE, for both real and personal property. And at that point, protests will be completed.
Okay, great.
And then they come back, after that process, they come back to the Board of Commissioners in a stack that'll be this high this year, not this high like it is in previous years, for us to go through and either agree or not agree or tweak. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then the next step for people who still aren't happy with what's going on is to go to the next level, which is the court system?
It can be the court system, or it could be the Board of Assessment Appeals, and that's through the state of Colorado, and that actually does cost money. I don't know how much, but it costs money.
Thank you. So it's a long process if you chose to go in that
It could be,
direction.
yes.
Okay, what's next?
So that's the whole process to get to the evaluation. The next piece we want to talk about is the assessment rate. And this is your slide too.
Me again. So for 2023, there is a temporary assessment rate decrease for residential and multifamily, which will be 6.765. It is currently 6.95. And one thing that's not in this slide, we just found this out, is the 6.765 assessment rate is not in our software currently because the software company was not able to have enough time to update the whole systems for anybody who has Tyler Technologies Eagle Assessor software. So it has currently got the 6.95% assessment rate showing on the assessed value in our software, and it won't be changed until July 15th. So if anybody's going to try to figure out their tax estimate based on the assessed value showing in our software, it will be incorrect. Which, like I said, we just found this out. Renewable
Better be
energy,
incorrect and have it be more.
right,
Right, and then they get a reduction later.
right. And renewable energy and agricultural property remained at 26.4%. The, let's see, where are we? Okay, industrial, vacant land, commercial are all assessed at 27.9%, which was 29%. They changed last year and they're staying that way. This is a new thing that Governor Polis just put into play. After CBOE, but before the end of the year, the software company also needs to do this to the software. We're going to be reducing every residential property by $15,000 and every commercial property by $30,000. So it will have all new values prior to August 25th certification.
Okay.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
This is so timely.
They did a lot to us this year. It's all good for taxes, though. It's all going to be good for the taxpayers.
So, any more questions on the valuation piece of it or the assessment rate? Okay, so when you have your value and the assessment rate, you end up with your assessed value, which of course we don't have right now, and that is the value on which a property is taxed. So in August each year, the assessor is required to certify to each taxing entity within the county the total actual and assessed value of property within the entity's boundaries, and any value of new construction or increases or changes in property taxes. This is, again, called the certification of values, and we use that to basically calculate from there on out our tax rate.
I have a-
Question, go
Real
Patty,
quick.
then Steve.
No, what federal property that may become taxable? That was,
So if there was, like, let's say the U.S. Forest Service building, they sold it in the private market.
so we did like a
It would
land
then
swap
become
kind of a thing.
taxable.
Okay, I thought,
Correct.
there's something new about
Yeah,
that.
it
We
goes,
can-
so every government property is tax exempt.
Right, so I was just wondering what would cause a federal property to become taxable? It would be like a land swap or land exchange.
Yes, or a church. A church could sell to a private entity, which happened down on Mountain, was it Mountain Shadows? Off of Cemetery Lane, the church that used to be down
Oh.
at the end. It sold to a private individual. So it went from tax exempt to taxable.
Right, I didn't know that.
So I'm trying to figure out if the governor is reducing the assessed, that's the assessed value by 15,000. Then the special districts in the county will decide on the mill levy. And they will raise the mill levy to make up the value that they just lost because of this supposed gift that the governor is giving all the taxpayers. Is that right?
It
Will the
depends.
taxes end up being the same, or
It
are they actually
depends.
gonna be reduced?
It depends on what
First
you're allowed to
question.
collect, and so that's kind of what I want to go through next, is how we actually calculate all of the mill levies. Because in some cases, yes, it would, but in others, it would not.
And if this is reducing the income to all the special districts and to the counties across the state, is the state legislature going to backfill this to the
I have an
special
answer.
districts and the counties?
I have an answer to that. The state is going to reimburse the counties for the difference.
Out of what?
From their Tabor refund money, which they're supposed to be returning to the public, so it's kind of,
Interesting.
This is
Yeah.
like mirrors and smokescreen kind of territory, it sounds like to me.
And then part of the proposal, it's my understanding, and I don't know, it's not been fully vetted, with what Governor Polis is to increase that reduction of value to 40,000.
I saw that
Yeah.
earlier today, yes.
So it could be a bigger hit, but that's interesting. We're gonna take from Tabor to give you what you're not getting that you should have gotten. Yeah.
They are also going to reimburse us the difference between the 6.95 and the 6.75.
So these things can get very complicated.
That's why we
It's
Yeah.
taxes.
pay you the big bucks to figure this out.
They don't seem to get simpler.
No, and simplification of the tax system would be an improvement. And I feel like a lot of what we're doing right now is Band-Aids just to keep us kind of going. So anyway, I'll talk a little bit on how we calculate the mill levies. As you all see when it comes to you before the budget, you're familiar with the mill levy. But just for the general public, and I just wanted to explain a little bit about how this happens. But basically, the mill levy is a tax rate that is applied to the assessed value, and 1 mill is equal to $1 per $1,000 of assessed value. So for Pitkin County, the organization itself, not for any of the districts or municipalities within our boundary, we are subject to some revenue restrictions on the majority of our funds, and I'll go through which ones have restrictions and which don't in a minute. But we have the Home Rule Charter, also called the Fenton Amendment, which was effective in 1979 and limits property tax increases by rate growth and assessed valuation multiplied by the October National CPI Index. We also have restrictions from the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, which were made effective in 1992. That requires a rate restriction and a revenue restriction of actual valuation multiplied by the Denver, Aurora, Lakewood CPI. So basically restricting any property tax increase more than inflation or the CPI. And then the state has an additional revenue restriction called the 5.5% limit, and that prevents any revenue increase over and above 5.5% total revenue of the property tax for the county or the district. And then in addition, we also have rate limits. So certain funds have rate limits and are not subject to the other limits, and I'll just go through those in a minute. My point being is that you don't just willy-nilly apply a tax rate to your assessed value, and there are a number of restrictions that keep it not in line with the actual valuation increase of your property.
Steve?
So with the Denver, Aurora, Lakewood CPI being used across the whole state, does this put rural parts of the state at a disadvantage when it comes to, or at an advantage?
Well,
Because,
I mean, I think if we had our own CPI for here, it would probably be higher than the Denver Aurora one. So for the county in terms of revenue, it's a disadvantage for us, but for the property taxpayers, it's an advantage. But actually this year it's going to be a moot point because the CPI is significantly higher than the 5.5% limit, so that comes into play. So that makes it a challenge for finance and budget because we are basically, our costs are increasing, likely at inflation or maybe even higher, and our revenue is restricted to 5.5% increase, so we're getting squeezed.
And Kelly?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to clarify that the most restrictive of these, well, of the first three is what applies. And
Correct.
then we have a limit to the mill levy, which is sort of dealt with separately.
Right. These are the 3 or 4 restrictions that apply to some of our funds in different ways. But the most restrictive is always the one that you have to use. It makes for very complex spreadsheets.
Because it's different for each fund.
It's different for each fund. So you can just see here the 3 different methods down the left and how they're all calculated in different ways. And so,
Can you go back to that? I'm sorry.
Sure, yeah.
I didn't understand that the first time I looked at it, and now I think I get it. Okay, I see how. All right, I just wanted to make sure that we have time to get a look at it. All right, thanks. Good for me.
So this next one, I apologize, it's so small. It's because we have a lot of funds and a lot of restrictions. So basically, to sum up, the majority of the county funds have restrictions placed on them. In fact, every single one of them does have a restriction placed on it of some kind or another. The most restrictive ones are the general fund, road and bridge, and human services, and they're subject to all of the restrictions that I listed on the previous slide. So in 2024, for instance, the statutory, I'm just guessing here, but the inflation rate is significantly higher than 5.5%. So it's going to prohibit us from collecting more than 5.5% increase in revenue on any of our general road and bridge and human services funds. So property values go up 80%, 100%. We can only collect 5.5% increase. There are two that, well, and it goes the same for most all of the others. They all have like fixed mills, Aspen Ambulance District, Open Space and Trails, and Redstone Ranch Acres GID all have fixed mills. And so in that case, it means that the property taxes would increase in line with the valuation of the property. And the library and the translator also have all the other restrictions applying.
So
Question, go
it would
ahead.
be my understanding then, we could, as a board, at some point, look at the ambulance district, open space and trails, and Redstone Ranch, and talk with them about their financial status and situation, and determine a credit.
Yes, and I'll just talk
Oh, yeah.
about that in a second. So when we get the certification of values, then it goes to basically finance, and finance calculates what the mill levy should be according to the revenue restrictions. And as we mentioned before, the greatest restriction of revenue is the one that is applied. And in the past, it's always been Tabor. This year, because inflation is higher than the 5.5%, 5.5% will be the restriction that we will have to use for the majority of our funds. We also apply refunds if we've over-collected in previous years, and credits. You'll see this all on the thing, and I don't necessarily need to get in all the detail, but the credits basically reduce the original mill levy that was approved to preserve it, so that we can always increase and, like you said, Steve, go back and collect things that we can collect under that original mill. And then abatements are applied to the calculation, and this is where there have been abatements applied back during the appeal process, and we can collect those too. We have to do these mill levy calculations 3 times before they get to be approved. We do the first one in August when we get the certification of values from the assessor. Then we do the second in December when we've received the amended certification and we have the CPI available. And then in February we redo it again to make sure that we're using what we actually were allowed rather than what we did collect to apply the refunds for the following year. So you can see up in that top right-hand corner, this is how we feel after we've done all of this. For each one of those funds, and then they each have 3 restrictions sometimes. So it ends up being a large number of calculations. So ultimately, the BOCC for Pitkin County government ultimately decides what services are needed to be funded through the budget process. And then the amount of tax that is needed to cover those community services. And that is entirely up to you. You make those decisions through the budget process. And after all of the mill levy calculations, after the budget and restrictions have been applied, you also have the ability to certify a refund in the form of a temporary property tax credit or a temporary mill levy rate reduction. So for those funds, for example, open space and trails that just have a fixed mill levy, where the property taxes, when we calculate them according to the restriction, will increase equal to the amount of valuation of the property, you then have the ability to do a mill levy credit or reduction in order to reduce the property tax on that collected for that fund.
And we need to be careful in doing that because of issues with Tabor, right? I mean, there's a manner in which you can do it where you don't have to go back to the voters to increase it again.
Correct. That's when we actually call it a credit. So we list the
It's not a
original
reduction,
approved
it's a
mill levy,
credit.
and then you're doing a temporary credit, a mill levy credit. So basically just for that 1 year, and then the following year, it goes
Reevaluate
back
again.
and you can decide what you want to do then.
Okay. We don't want to mess with that Tabor guy, you know.
Question?
Well, and there is some legislation pending that would clarify the legal
Ability to do that.
ability to do that.
Great.
It's stalled, but hopefully it goes.
Okay.
Steve?
Yeah.
So
So-
when you're doing all these calculations, do you have a computer program that does the bulk of the work for you? Or is this more like you are doing something like in the Hidden Figures movie where they are pencil and
Quants.
paper and
We have
doing these
quants in the room.
extreme calculations over and over and over again?
Then we're going
Yeah,
to the
so,
moon.
you know, and Liz can speak to it because she's taken it over from me now that she's the finance director. But we have a very large Excel spreadsheet with a lot of macros and formulas in that will do all of the calculations for us. And obviously, we need to go back and check they're correct. But yes, it actually can be really quick. You just plug in your new valuation numbers, the CPI, and it'll automatically calculate it for all the funds. But building the spreadsheet took a very long time.
And Ann and Liz go through and check it with a slide rule.
Those little beads. on-
I probably do, but Liz doesn't. So this is the mill levy
Hey, come here.
sheet that you see before every board, every
Come here.
when you approve the budget and the mill levies. So this shows all of the taxing districts and funds for which you are responsible, and this is 2022 property tax that we're collecting in 2023, just to show you how it appears. Just thought it might be interesting to show you a little bit of history here. So I'll just start. The bars are the amount of property tax collected in all of Pitkin County. And the line is the assessed valuation. First, to point out the everything but the sort of red bar is Pitkin County, the government itself, and so the rest is all the other districts and municipalities over which we have no say. Interesting to note that in the last recession, or rather prior to the last recession, the assessed valuations increased significantly. Property taxes did increase, but not in the same rate as the assessed valuations. That was during the last time we experienced such a sort of peak and trough situation. However, I also want to point out that the gap between the line and the bar has closed significantly in the last 5 or 6 years. And I believe it's because a lot of districts and municipalities have debruced. And so now it's kind of more tracking in line. It'll be interesting to see though, because for example, our Healthy Community Fund technically is debruced. You removed all the state restrictions on it. However, you put on a local restriction, preventing us increasing collections more than inflation for the Healthy Community Fund. So it has a restriction, but it's not a state restriction. So if you go to the state website, it'll say Pickens County Healthy Community Fund is debruced. But we have our own restriction on it, so it's very hard to deduce. I can't say for sure what's going to happen with other districts because I don't know without reading every single one of their pieces of ballot language.
Question?
I'm wondering if my deduction is accurate. Because I guess I'm looking at this, and Pickens County did some temporary relief after the last major recession, but values didn't come back down. So then when we readjusted that, folks' taxes increased back up to those assessed value levels, but their, the value and essentially wealth they built over time remained high. There wasn't a drop again. Is that fair to conclude?
Well, the chart shows the assessed valuations did drop, and so did property taxes.
From where? Because we were looking at 2006.
In 2010, yeah,
2010.
10 to 12.
2010, 2012.
2014.
Did we do relief then?
I
do a
understand that
temporary?
Open Space and Trails had a mill levy credit on that fund.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know how long for. Oh, Connie would know. Here she is.
Well,
Our
as
historian.
far as I can remember, there was only 1 year that there was a credit on the Open Space and Trails mill levy, if I'm remembering correctly. And that pink line that's on the top of the chart, that's the values. So the values peaked during one assessment cycle, but then when you had the revaluation 2 years later, they dropped back down to where they were before.
Right. Okay.
And so those credits that the board had given were no longer necessary because values were dropping back down.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Great. It's helpful to learn how to read these charts. Thanks.
So just a little bit about the other taxing entities, and I think I forgot to update the slide because we had conflicting numbers. DOLA says 53, 51 says Najou. So anyway, we have 51 taxing entities within Pickens County. They follow all the same processes that we do in terms of calculating their mill levies and everything. As I mentioned before, the restrictions are all different. So their mill levies are going to be different. And each one of them has their own budget, and they determine the property tax that they need to collect. And their boards authorize those collections. Our role only is to get that information from them when they've approved it and then send out the property tax bills. So even though it comes from Pickens County, we are only responsible for the pieces that we collect for our own funds in terms of calculation.
So Greg,
Yep.
a suggestion from members of the Committee for Taxpayers is to speak with those districts which they're uncomfortable with their mill levies coming up this year, because we have no control over what the fire department or the hospital or the school district, CMC, for example, charges. So that would be something we would want to encourage people to do, is to speak with them when they're setting their mill levy and ask them for some kind of temporary credit reduction that might be worth their time and energy this year.
Deb, sure.
Our office actually put together a spreadsheet of all those taxing authorities and districts with the contact person's name, phone number, and email.
Perfect, thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
very, very helpful for the public. Appreciate that.
So once all of those mill levies have been approved by each of the taxing entities, they are basically collected by the treasurer, and the treasurer prepares property tax notices, and they are sent out in January, after January 10th. So people won't know what their property tax is going to be until January 2024. There's an awful lot that has to happen before then, and then all these recent legislative things could change all of it before we even get to calculating our mill levy. So there we are. That's kind of what goes into it.
With a week left in the legislative session, you kind of have to assume that some things just aren't going to happen. You know, what's being talked about, and so where does that leave us? We default back to what was existing, I assume. I don't know.
Except if they extend the session or call for a special session.
I mean, I think there's a couple different circumstances at play, because there's also ballot initiatives that I don't know if those would take effect in time for this, but, you know, those ballot initiatives are really focused on pretty much keeping taxes low without total regard to how government's expenses and services and what all of our needs are as a local government. They're really focused on keeping taxpayers' tax bills low. And so these proposals are a bit in response to trying to that and trying to find a more moderate proposal, I would say, that balances you know, any sting the taxpayer might feel with just the reality of local government services. I would say that's fair to say, but we don't know what's going to get done in the last 8 days of session.
So these ballot initiatives are the bills that are being, would again perhaps affect local control?
What they would go to the voters to decide.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
So I don't have a ton of information about these ballot initiatives. They've just all come out just in the last 24 hours, and we're still trying to decipher what's going on. But as information becomes available, I'll be happy to talk about it. And then just one other final thing I wanted to mention was that we're working with Human Services to potentially put into place a program for some property tax relief for vulnerable populations, like veterans, disabled, low income. So we'll bring that back to you to review, but wanted to see if we could put into place a program that might help some of those populations, not for the broader group, but for the most hard, vulnerable people in the community.
Great, thank you, and that'll be timely. I assume you'll have that. Other questions? I just understand that if you want to protest, you're not protesting your tax, you're protesting the evaluation as it's been.
Correct.
So, and people have, you've discussed the deadlines for that. It's a long process, but you do have to have things pretty much in by, I don't have the date in front of me, is it June?
June 8th.
June 8th, thank you. And it's going to be a long process, and we're going to see a lot of activity on this, both at the state level and locally, obviously. Patty?
Yeah, I have a question for staff as a whole. What can we do to help you guys get through this? Hire a whole new department to help manage these and get them all done, since they gave you a week longer to get the protests and a week shorter to process them?
We'll just be working really hard,
Okay.
long
So
hours.
we'll see what we can do to help you guys out during that time.
We'll let you know if we're running into a problem. We'll definitely call you in.
Let us know.
I'm already engaging on these property tax legislations, but we will not meet again before the next week. So would you all give me permission to work with Ann and figure out how Pickens County should advocate on these?
Definitely. And
That's a
also
nod from Steve.
to bake cookies for staff during the, I'm going to point you to that
Be
too.
happy to.
And then report to us, because everyone's going to want to know.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for that. That helps. I
Great
feel
information.
slightly less panicked. Hopefully the community listening will as well. And I'm sure we'll hear from them.
It's great information for the community.
Thanks for making that as clear as you possibly could. And I was able to follow.
You were right. We're not brain dead. We're extremely educated and smart now.
Thank you all for coming.
you.
It's great to see the support from your team there.
Thanks.
They're all taking a break.
I know, right?
Answering the phone.
They're waiting to find out if we're going to go into panic mode.
Yeah, they're like, couldn't this meeting be a little bit longer? Hi.
Okay, so it's 1:50. We're almost on schedule.
I'm sorry if she barks, but she has to be with, we have nobody home these days.
She's good. As long as if you have treats, it's even better.
No, she knows. Look at Alex. She's like.
Okay, up next, we have the school incident debriefing. And so we have Michael Boulione here, our sheriff, Alex Burchetta, our undersheriff. John Peacock is not here.
And we also brought along David Bock.
David Baugh
Hi,
from
David.
the superintendent of the schools is here. Thank you.
Good girl.
Thanks for coming in. We've all been looking forward to this, and just take it away.
Is it?
Red light's on.
Red light
Red light
on.
is on.
Okay. Well, thank you for having us. And school incidents, maybe debriefing, because we had a total of three. We had the gentleman who threatened the Summit schools but was heading up this way, and then the 2 swatting calls. We learned a lot. We filled some holes that we can always get better, and we did with each and every call. I'm not going to go into too much detail about how the school is up their game with security. I'll let David do that. But do you want to do a question and answer, QA? How do you envision this going this afternoon?
We could open up to questions now if there are preliminary questions people want to ask. I think the feedback I heard from the community was just the communication between various teams regarding the traffic at the roundabout, or getting people in and out. Of course, the chaos, the fog that happens in a situation like that is to be expected, and we know that the incident management team is trained to handle situations like that. So maybe just an update on what was learned regarding how all these teams worked together.
There were lots learned. I met with the ER staff, and one of their issues was we couldn't get to the hospital. If there were patients being brought to the hospital, we couldn't get to the hospital. So lesson learned. Next
Through the
next-
roundabout.
Right.
That's the choke point.
Yeah. So there were lots of lessons learned. Probably too numerous to go through everyone here. But the communications, I think the communication that parents were having was coming from the school, and I'll let David
Or from their
touch on it.
kids. The kids were
Yeah, the kids
communicating.
and
Oh,
the-
yeah, I mean, yeah,
There's
the
multiple-
rumor mill was
Yeah.
quicker than anything that we could put out.
Right. If you want to go to that, sure, David.
Sure. We, as the sheriff has said, there were a lot of learnings over those 3 incidents. Thank you,
Red
Alex.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. We've learned how to work as a team much better.
Been here before.
These guys make me look much better, so thank you. Thank you. We learned a lot about communications. Kids were communicating erroneously, so we have to work a lot faster as a school district to get information out to parents and families. We folded in an optional sign-in for kids to get text messages that their parents get for this year, and it's mandatory for next year. We found out that our system, if parents opt out of, say, getting snow day notifications, it takes them right out of the system, so they weren't getting any information during our critical incidents. So we found a number of weaknesses, if you will, in our system. One of the things we found was around the communication, and sometimes communicating no new news is communicating. So we've gone to 15-minute centers of communicating no new news. Basically, we're in a lockdown situation. Please avoid the campus. We're coordinating with law enforcement, and we're doing it in English and Spanish in real time, or on 15-minute centers. And then when we have new news, we will change the messaging. So it'll be on our website. It'll be coming through text, messaging as well. So that was the big learning there. The other big learning I think we had is that these guys were fantastic. I think we had our school resource officer through the front door in less than 25 seconds of the school we were most concerned about. I think you took to calling him the Green Flash, if I'm not mistaken. But response time was incredible. As you know, we're going through a construction project right now, and so we're kind of, at the time of those incidents, we were in sort of a flux status with access to the schools. As of this time, just about every law enforcement officer from here to Basalt has 24/7 access to all the schools through the front doors. Swipe and go. And so we've learned a lot about that. Early specs on our internal projects suggest that they weren't spec'd out correctly, and we've, learned that we need to make some changes there. So,
Is that regarding security for the construction crews, for instance, or?
well, so, yes, sir. So construction crews sign in every day now, and they go through a Raptor system where we check for criminal background every single day for every single construction worker. The contracts with the construction companies called for them to run the clearance and background checks, but we just took it to the next level anyway. Why not? And it doesn't take that long for us to do it. So we're checking every construction worker every day, so we know who's on campus and where they are.
And that allows us to communicate directly with them in the event of a lockdown.
Right.
So if, during the construction, when you put the school in lockdown, we communicate with the students and the staff that the facility's on a certain status. There was a demographic or section of the people that are actually on campus that we couldn't communicate with. So now they're getting the same messages about the facility being on lockdown or secure or whatever.
Absolutely.
Regarding your 15-minute updates, that goes to parents as well as students as well as the rest of us, I assume. It's like Pitkin Alert?
It's
Different.
separate.
It is separate.
We're
Okay.
sending out our messaging that should be close to what the school's sending out through the Pitkin Alert system, and Alice can go a little.
That really is the goal. One of the gaps that we discovered through the after action review process and just going through the evolution of both of the incidents was that we were both sending out information, but they weren't always timed at the same time. So the school's message or our message might have gotten a little bit of ahead of the other one. So what we've worked on, and our comms team led by Marcy and Tracy Truelove and also Monica at the school district, is to really integrate those processes so that we know that we're sharing the same information or close to the same information as possible at as close to the same time as possible, so that not only students and teachers and parents are receiving the same information, but the community is receiving the same information at the same time.
So can I just understand how the structure of the incident command works in a situation like this?
Sure.
So that, say something were to happen at the hospital, like how do you integrate these other big institutions into an incident command response like that?
I'll say the initial response, there is no incident command. The initial response is to get in there and stop the bad thing that's happening. What's happening behind that is incident command is being set up, and we just signed an agreement that the fire department, because we're going to be the first ones in a school incident like
Threat,
that.
yeah.
So the fire department will set up command behind us, and it'll depend on what the incident is. But there's no finite answer to that question. It all depends on what the incident is. But if it's an active shooter at the school, the incident command will be set up probably after the situation is neutralized.
Right. So then how do you guys organize decision-making related to who's sending out the communication or what the communication is? I guess
So
I would like to understand.
Typically in a situation like the schools, we would go to something called unified command. So you'd have an incident commander or two incident commanders, depending on the agencies that have jurisdiction. So in this case, it'd be the sheriff's office and the school as a stakeholder in the incident. And not really talking about kind of when it's set up, but just how it's set up. The decision-making capabilities and when to send the messages and how to send the messages and what the message is really ultimately lies with the unified commanders or the two incident commanders. So in one of those incidents, I think it was it me and you at one point? Mm-hmm. So, I have absolute trust in Tracy Truelove and Marcy Swazo, and the comms team to put out messages on behalf of public safety. And I know David also and his team also has the same trust in Monica and their communication staff. So it's not like we're sitting there saying, no, that needs a period or that you have to
Right, sure.
change that comma or whatever. So there's a level of sort of autonomy that they have, But ultimately, the decision-making capabilities of what the message is and how it's going to go out and when it's going to go out really lies with the incident commanders.
And to that point, we've worked on some boilerplate
Sure.
language for
Template.
straight out of the gate. And then we would, as I mentioned earlier, for us to change our message, it would be in conjunction with working with, you know, Alex, Michael, that sort of thing.
It's also, I think you mentioned the incident management team, Kelly. I think it's incident management team actually was the Pitkin County Incident Management Team, as we kind of know it from COVID and all that stuff, wasn't even involved in this. This was purely initial response, initial attack, if to use a wildfire term. And not to get too far in the weeds, but we were very low on the type rating of what the incident was. So it really was ad hoc. It was David and I just being incident commanders with our respective law enforcement and personnel running operations. It wasn't a very structured, formal incident management team process like that you've probably come to see in other incidents we've run.
Could I ask another one just about communications again? I'm trying to remember when the first incident happened.
February 22nd.
The SWAT. I think it was a swatting, right?
February 22nd. It's a Wednesday.
I heard about it from a parent first who'd heard about it from his kid. And maybe it's because I wasn't getting a pick and alert my bad, or somehow he had it before, and it took a little while. There was a pretty good gap before I started getting official communication. When we have a crisis here, generally it comes through our county manager,
Right.
and we try to communicate solely through him, so we're not all calling you or you to ask what's going on. My concern is that those are the sort of things that need to be updated. Whenever anybody does a software update in their phone or whatever, sometimes these things get lost or dumped.
Sure.
And we almost need a regular reminder that, hey, if you want to be part of this network, it's something that requires maintenance. And so the communication requires maintenance.
Sure.
Once you've established it and you figure out how it's going to work, let's make sure the parents are on board and the kids as well. Just so if we get that message from a parent or from a kid before we get it from you, we know what to expect.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to plug Pick and Alert for the public and to remind people that have signed up to go in and log in and ensure that they are signed up for the appropriate messages. Because like the school district system, you can select and unselect different types of messages. And if you're not signed up for community alerts or whatever the type is, you may not receive the message about the incident going on at the school. And then the other thing to remember is that, where we live and, everyone has a cell phone. Kids have cell phones in school, even though I don't think they're supposed to.
High school kids.
As soon as the school goes on lockdown or secure or whatever the status is, we're immediately behind the eight ball. We are playing catch up with social media and text messages to
Right.
parents. So the message, as you said, is already getting out before we can even do any type of public official messaging.
And not necessarily the correct message.
Oh, no,
100%,
no.
completely true.
Never, chances are it won't be because there's so many different sources.
For sure.
Patty,
Go ahead,
then
Steve, you can go,
Steve,
then I'll go
Patty.
to Steve.
So with the 3 incidents, it seemed like you had a different response. It was less urgent by the time we got to the 3rd incident. And I think part of that's probably that there was less of a threat to the school, I think. But maybe you had the system set up and had a different response to it. So I'm just questioning, did you have a different response, or you had the whole process wired so the perception was you were doing something different, but maybe you were doing all the same steps?
We were doing the first incident with the gentleman coming up Valley. That was different than the 2 swatting calls. The
That
first
was a
swatting
different
call,
level of
right.
threat, definitely.
Because we had that done down in Old Snowmass and taken care of and buttoned up. The first swatting call, it was all hands on deck because it was real until it wasn't real. So we, to over respond may be a mistake. To under respond is catastrophic. So keeping that in mind, for the second one, I was in David's office when the call, or got into my car when the call came out, and I was right at the elementary school. I'm like, okay, I'm taking out my gun at the elementary school. Just didn't seem right, but you're there, you do it. But it was different because There were no screaming kids. There was no gunshot. There was no one running around. So it became apparent a lot quicker. And we also had information from dispatch, and I don't want to misquote them, but they said something to the effect that it sounds like the same call as last week. So that kind of brought it down. But we still responded in a way we'll respond if we get the same one tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we didn't have as many ambulances or fire apparatus or anything like that for the second one than we did for the first one. But we still responded the way we would respond. So yes, it's kind of pre-wired. That's the way we're trained to go in. All the other, again, fire trucks and ambulances and medics, the 27 medics we had, and Snowmass and Basalt and State Patrol, yeah, that was kind of put to bed a lot sooner on the second one than the first one.
Patty?
The traffic congestion, parents panic, but you can't blame them by any means. I'm gonna go get my kid. And thinking about crews getting to the hospital, because I know they called in all their trauma crews. I know they had amazing response from ambulances and the first responder response, we cannot thank you enough, was huge. And everybody was on it. But how do we control that traffic congestion? And on any day, but I'm not going there.
Tie my question to that, because the first question I was going to ask you today was, when we're talking about how emergency crews couldn't get to the hospital, that's a problem. I believe that the pedestrian and bicycle bridges to Tyhack and to the old Midland Railway alignment next to off to 8th Street from Meralt were designed to accommodate an emergency vehicle. And I'm just wondering, I'd actually like to see those used because a time may come where we decide we need to use them for egress from the community if the Castle Creek Bridge were to fail, for instance, or something.
The 8th Street pedestrian bridge is designed to fit one ambulance, barely.
Right.
That's my understanding.
And
Right.
at a time.
One
At a time.
time.
Okay.
It's not a fast.
So those,
It can
you can't
accommodate
fill it with traffic.
pedestrian vehicles at a different level. The same thing with the Merle Bridge. But that being said, you still have to have a way to get off the bridge into the hospital, which is another issue we do need to address, I agree, but.
And again, that's if they're coming from Aspen. Most of the trauma team lives
Yeah,
down valley.
and how do they get it up tomorrow, yeah,
So the benefit of the, as the sheriff was talking about earlier with the fire department setting up the incident command system behind law enforcement, because quite frankly, when we're responding to these situations, we're not thinking about traffic. And I just don't know how else to say it. We're thinking about going and stopping the threat, whatever the threat is, so that we can keep the community safe.
As you should be, yeah.
So the fire department, as great as they are, in those situations, coming up and setting up that command system behind, they're the ones thinking about the traffic management plan.
flagging.
They're the ones setting up the control points. We had an amazing response from Pickens County Road and Bridge, who just constantly steps up to the game and helps us out with all sorts of incidents. And they set up, DJ and his crew set up a traffic control point at Owl Creek and Highway 82 to alleviate some of the pressure that we were seeing up at the roundabout. So there was a traffic management plan that was starting to be put in place. A lot of the medics and firefighters that responded to the incident had kids in the school, so there's this pull. You're a public safety professional, but you're also a parent, and you're concerned. So, I was really impressed with the structure that they put in place, and they started to work through some of these traffic management plans. It took a little bit because it was a snowy Wednesday in February that everybody was coming up to go skiing. But just to give you some background on kind of what that would look like. That wouldn't be the law enforcement officials taking care of the traffic management. It would be the structure behind.
I can't even imagine having had a kid there.
Yeah.
So my next question, I don't want to push it too far, would be if we were to design and plan for egress of a lot of people from that area, what options are there for us through other properties across open space? I'm just wondering what else is there and what has been contemplated, because a time may come where we decide we need to do that in a hurry. Just something to think about. I'm sure people have been Valerie's not here. Or,
I'd
you know,
say Valerie
but-
has been working.
We've actually been meeting since last summer with a small group of the Upper Valley kind of public safety individuals to talk about that emergency egress plan. And quite frankly, I think everything's on the table. And it depends on the situation, right? If it's a huge wildfire where we have to evacuate everyone really quickly, that's going to look a little different than maybe just trying to ask people to start thinking about leaving, right? The primary artery is going to be Highway 82. There are other arteries that we talked about, like on the pedestrian bridge, the use of the open space, the Rio Grande Trail from Puppy Smith down. It all comes with their, unique challenges and complications and complexities. But it's something we're definitely looking at. And I know the city of Aspen's looking at it as well.
Right, right. I think it's great. That's all for me then. Thanks, Steve, and then Kelly.
So I was thinking kind of along the same line, is there an alternative route to avoid the roundabout to get from the school area to the hospital? And it might be just putting a vehicle on the bike path that goes up by the Aspen Chapel and then down back to the other road, avoiding the roundabout completely. Because if all the parents, everybody's trying to get there to the school, the highway could be totally clogged up. It would be next to impossible to actually get an ambulance
For sure.
down through there.
Yeah.
And I think we should plan those alternative routes like Greg was suggesting.
Definitely. We had an open house, not an open
Right,
house,
the
a town hall
meeting.
a few days after the first incident.
Yeah.
And I think one of the messages that came out of there was, we all have partnerships and we're all stakeholders in the incident, but the parents are equally as important partners in this. And when we issue information that says stay away from the school, please don't come to the school, or whatever the direction may be, our request is to ask them to listen to that and trust us that we're giving them the right information, because as you said, and parents they want to come to the school to make sure their kids are safe. And I have 2 kids. I completely understand that. But we need to create a safe space for the officers and the first responders to operate, and also to get emergency medical personnel up to the hospital. And if we're saying please don't come to Aspen, stay away from the roundabout or whatever it is, and they still come, it actually may create the logjam and the traffic management issue that we saw back in February. Mm-hmm. So the message is, please, listen to our messaging, please, and trust us that the message is a valid one.
And I've had a conversation with members of the ER staff and how we can better, give them a tag. That's not going to get cars to move for them, though. We can't just make all their vehicles emergency response vehicles. So it's in discussion on how we can get the trauma team, those responders, to the hospital in case patients are going to the hospital.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Give them a one wheel, one of those electric, if they survive that. Thank you all. One more question, then I think we're closing out. 2 more questions.
What were the lessons learned related to the reunification with parents? I'd be curious. And then, as Michael knows, we've heard from parents related to school resource officer resources. If you want to speak to what I believe you guys have put more additional resources towards that, so I'd like to hear about that as well.
Right now, there's not an additional school resource officer. That is happening. We're doing a process within the sheriff's office to make that happen, hopefully for the next school year. We've also included Country Day and Community into that fold, which school resource officer will float around them and help them with their policies and their safety, and just become that known uniformed law enforcement officer that can get to know those kids. And it's not just the school campus of the elementary, middle, and high school. So I've had some good conversations. We all have had some good conversations with the other schools. And what was your other part of your question? I'm sorry.
I'm curious what your lessons learned about the reunification with parents and students.
Don't do it at bumps in the wintertime.
Take that maybe.
That was a quick
Do you
lesson
want to take
learned.
reunification?
So we are working on the reunification process, and like Alex was saying earlier, a lot of the reunification plan boils down to it depends. And it depends on the situation, it depends on the building, it depends on
The time of day?
time of day,
Of year?
time
And
of
year.
year, and so we're looking at the possibility of, the high school, for the most part, might reunify over, at the ambulance corps building. The middle school might go to the ARC. The elementary school might go to the church. And then again, if we have to evacuate the entire campus, that changes things because, as you know, we have a bus driver shortage. So, and we don't have them on staff at certain hours of the day. So for us to pick up 1,500 students and staff and move them somewhere else, like to Bumps, that's probably a bad idea on a good day. But so we're continuing to work on that. We're working, with law enforcement to figure out a good solution, and part of our work this summer is to redraft our crisis manual. And so we've retained a person to help us lead that work who has a lot of experience with it.
I have one quick thing to add that Kelly made me think of. I know when we have issues like this, we notify the local child care facilities. I think that's missing in that loop is home child care facilities. So I think I mentioned this to you because I know my daughter runs one in Glenwood. She received a notice from her son's school, but she runs a home child care. She never heard anything when the issue reached down into Glenwood Springs. So just want to make sure we get a better notification system so we don't lose those other home child care facilities.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming in. Is there anything
Yeah,
else you
thanks,
want
gentlemen.
to share? Well, I guess we'll learn about this at when you have something else in place, right? We'll all sign up for Pitkin Alert. That's the
Please
first
do.
thing.
We'll make sure Greg is
And
updated.
parents get on the student and parent alert from the schools as it's separate. Thank you for coming. This has been really, really helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you
be
all.
safe out
And
there.
I have to say, I think we do have the best incident management program anywhere, and other people tell us that too. So we can be proud of that, and it's good to see you're all paying attention to all of that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
It's a relief, yeah. Have a good afternoon.
You too.
We're going to move along. Does anybody need a short break?
I think I'm good.
Okay, we're going to keep plugging away here. We've got some regular meeting items for upcoming, and these are interviews with volunteers for our various commissions and boards. And up first, Charlotte will start us off. Is Denise here?
Hello.
She's here. Come on down if you'd like to come up.
Can come up. As you recall, let me make sure. There we go. As you recall, the last time I was in front of you, we made the decision to extend the deadline for applications to April 28th. So today, we have two applicants for the election board and one applicant for the APSHA board. So the first one is Denise Hoagland. Yes. Thank you. I will let you all ask her questions.
Thanks,
Great.
Charlotte.
Welcome, Denise.
Thank you.
Now, there's a Hoagland that's spelled slightly differently. So did we get it wrong, or are you part of the Hoagland family that's been here forever, or are you?
I am not.
Okay, so it is with double O. Great.
Yes,
Good to know.
but pronounced Hoagland.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pronounced Hoagland. Thank you so much for coming. Tell us about your experience and why you would like to be in this position.
Okay. Well, I moved to Aspen about 9 years ago from New York City, and I've always been interested in elections and politics, and currently, well, I've always been interested in volunteering, and that goes back to my days actually even in high school, where I did some volunteering in a community that was not as fortunate as the one that I was in, and I did some tutoring then. So that's followed through, you know, until today. I'm currently involved in English in Action, where I was on that board for a period of time. And I'm a tutor, and I've been involved doing that actually since I've moved here. So I've been looking for ways to get a little more involved in the community. And this came up, and yeah, it's just something that I'm very interested in, and being sure that we have fair and transparent elections. So,
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask if we have any questions from the board. Kelly?
Hi, thank you for applying, I appreciate it. Elections are near and dear to my heart. Have you been an election judge or an election watcher at all for any election or any Picken County elections?
no, I have not.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have that experience, but I do have enthusiasm
Okay.
and a willingness to serve
Mhm.
and to learn. So I hope that'll be helpful in that
And,
position.
What's your experience been voting here? Like, what has your
Excellent.
observations been? Okay.
You know, I love the mail ballot. You know, I grew up in New Jersey, but have lived
I know
in New York
Jersey.
City. What's that?
I said, I know New Jersey.
Are you originally from New Jersey?
Sort of. That's where I go visit family.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. I think New Jersey has just started mail-in voting. I just think it's incredibly convenient and safe. So yeah, I'm very supportive of the process.
Thank you.
Patty?
That was good, that tags on to my question. Do you have any concerns over previous elections, perhaps 2020? Where there was a lot of concern over the safety of mail-in ballots, the transparency, fraud.
Right.
Do you feel the way, because, you know, we have a great system here, which we've had people, not just within Picken County and the state, but across the country, who've questioned, and it's just of interest if you have any concerns or questions regarding that.
Zero. I have no concerns about it at all. I feel like the last election was fair, transparent. You know, my personal opinion is there was no fraud.
Thank you.
Yeah.
'Cause our staff works very hard to run efficient, transparent, clean elections.
Exactly.
And by the way, being an election judge is really fun, but if you're appointed to this board, you can't be an election judge.
Okay.
If you're not appointed, you can be, just
All
to
right.
put that
Well,
out there.
I'll keep that in my back pocket.
It's really fun. And
Okay.
friends, and we encourage your friends to sign up with the election office, because being an election judge, it's an amazing process to watch and see. And as far as the election board, they don't meet a lot. They meet when there's a concern that's brought forward from the public. You work with the election office and with Ingrid Gruder. So it's a fun way to start your involvement in volunteering with Picken County.
All right.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Steve, any questions?
I was going to ask a similar question to
Okay.
what Patty asked, so
Right.
I'll just express my thanks for you for, you know, for applying for this position. In terms of you are a registered Democrat, are you active in the Democratic Party here in Picken County? And
I
if so,
am. Yeah,
what sort
I
of
am.
activities do you do there?
Yeah, when I moved here, I was registered as an independent, but I decided to register as a Democrat so that I could vote in the primary. Because I think when I moved here, you had to be registered in a particular party to be able to vote in the primary. But I believe that's changed. Anyway, yeah, I am involved with the Picken County Democrats. I have done some canvassing, some voter registration. I helped cure the vote when Adam Frisch, you know, was running. So that's been my involvement with the Picken County Democrats.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to comment on your attention to detail I saw on your resume, and I think, well, that sounds like a really valuable, important quality. And I think you're not an election judge, as we pointed out, but I think about the other communities, thankfully not ours, where there is a lot of pressure and tension regarding elections and distrust. And so the question would be, I guess if you're coming from New York, you've spent time in New York, then you can handle, you know, your typical stresses and conflict. But what do you think about that? You know, what's your feeling of level of confidence to be on a commission that could possibly be in a difficult situation at some point?
Right. Well, I'm very concerned about that because I know we've had that issue, you know, not in our county, but we have a strong, not the Attorney General, but she's a Secretary of State, I guess, yeah,
Right.
who
Right.
is doing an incredible job, you know, around that issue. Yeah, I'm from New Jersey and New York. I'm ready for a good fight.
Okay, that's all I have for you. Thank
Okay.
you for coming.
Right.
I don't know what our decision date will be, but we'll be getting back to you. But really do appreciate you coming
Okay.
on and applying.
Yeah, I just had maybe two questions. You know, I
Sure.
looked at the home rule charter, and it seemed like it indicated that there were only 2 other board members, but they're more than that, correct?
There's supposed to be 5.
Okay,
We've had 2.
right.
And just recently appointed another, so there are 2 vacancies.
All right. And is it a 2-year term per the
It's a-
charter?
I don't have that in front
I
of
think
me.
it's longer.
Do you all? I thought it was a 4-year. I think it's 4. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
All right,
think
so
we have
maybe
any-
that's been updated since
Yeah. I'll have to
this
check that out.
home
Yeah,
rule
we want to give you a
charter.
chance to go through a full cycle.
Okay. And let's see, anything else? I guess there's some other duties that are, you know, listed in this charter, but it seems like the main responsibility is, you know, if an issue comes up. I mean, that seems to be the main responsibility. Okay. And in Ingrid's email to me, she indicated that the board members, that we need to stay up to date, obviously, on knowledge, you know, that would affect elections. So how are we kept up to date on knowledge?
Well, she usually tries to have at least one meeting before
Okay.
an election
Okay.
to gather all of you and just kind of,
Sure that we know what's going
yeah,
on.
yeah, give you an update at that point.
All right, that sounds good. All right,
Great.
well, very nice to meet you all.
Nice.
Thank you for coming
I'm
in.
surprised
Yeah.
we haven't met somewhere along
I
the
know.
party line.
I mean, I know all your names. Yeah. Well, you were certainly discussing a really serious subject,
Yeah.
you know, beforehand. I mean, that's a real tough one,
Yeah.
facing the
I know.
community.
We're
So-
grateful to be in this community where we've got a great team working on that.
It sounds like it, so, all right, nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Likewise.
Thanks for your service
Thank you.
already.
Have a good
Yeah.
afternoon.
Thank you, Denise.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
meet
we're going to keep moving here, and Mike Simmons is in the room. Come on down, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Good afternoon, I think I know you all.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
I got to see Margaret this morning when I voted at the firehouse. 'Cause I managed to remember my husband's ballot, but not my own.
I got confused on which one went where.
So
Okay.
Mike is here applying for the election board as well. And these are the last 2 applicants that we have for the election board. So as we go through this week's and next week's applications and interviews, then I'll come back to you
Great.
all for a decision.
So we'll probably know in a 3 weeks,
Yeah.
something like that. Great. So that's our timeline, Mike. It's nice to see you stepping up for service yet again. And so thank you. What questions do we have for Mike? Patty?
Mike, having known you for as long as I've known you, your resume, is amazing. I mean, I was telling Michaela earlier, in how many communities do you have people apply for volunteer boards that have a BA from Rice, an MS from LSU, and a PhD from Cornell? So, we appreciate your stepping up to the plate here and applying for this board, and I'm surprised we haven't seen you do this much sooner than now. You've been so active in elections within Pickens County, for which I think we all appreciate greatly.
Thank you.
So the only question I have, is there anything you forgot to add in your CV?
I've forgotten who wrote it, but there is a quotation that I have. Someone said, "I apologize for the length of my letter, but I did not have time to make it shorter."
That was Mark Twain.
Thank you for
Probably others have said the same thing, so what I did is rummage around in my files and pull out an overcomplete resume.
It was
Sorry.
very, very fascinating to read, Mike. So I just want to thank you for coming forward today and
Welcome.
applying for this board.
Steve?
So, Mike, you heard in the previous interview that you can't be an election judge if you're on this board. Now, if it came down to push versus shove, if you had a choice, would you rather continue being an election judge where you'd actually have a lot more work than being on a board that meets very, very seldom?
Honestly, I had not realized that. In the old days, and it's quite a while ago, when I first started working on elections, I was younger, and getting to a precinct at 6 o'clock in the morning and leaving at 9 or 10 was something I could do. In more recent years, I've said, look, I'm willing to do some work, but I'm not willing to be there for 12 hours a day. That work has devolved into stuff in the local office, and I value doing that. And I've gotten to know the election process in this county. I don't have any way of assessing what other states are like, really, but my impression from the news is that Colorado is the gold standard for election integrity or any measure of quality. And as best I can tell, Pickens County is the gold standard here. I first got involved, I can't remember the year, but I know when Dwight Shellman was the election manager, I worked closely with him. And since then, my wife and I have been involved as judges in every election. So I value that, and I think we've contributed. If I can contribute in this way and not be at work at 6 o'clock in the morning, that would be fine.
That sounds good.
That's a
Sounds like a
great
good
answer.
solution. Your analytical mind has come up with a good solution. It makes perfect sense to me.
Okay.
I don't have any questions. I think I looked at your application and appreciate your candid response and your history of service to the community. So thanks. That's it for me. Anybody else? Then we're
I don't have
probably
any questions. I know Mike well.
great. Thanks for coming
Thanks,
in.
Celia and I have worked together on this
I
stuff.
know, I've been looking
I
too.
know, I've worked a couple of elections with you, I think.
So one more question. Since you've been around elections a lot as a judge, are there any things that you see that you would suggest changes in our procedure or the process or how things go?
I was really very impressed with the way elections ran when Janice was running them, and I've been impressed with Ingrid's work. And I hadn't thought of getting that question, so I don't have a ready answer for you, but this county's elections run really well. And one of the important things that's always been a characteristic of the office is it's nonpartisan, and it is committed to making sure that anyone who is an elector, who is a qualified voter, gets a chance to vote, and bending over backwards to make sure that that person's ballot is not eliminated for some trivial reason. And if it takes hours of investigation, we've done that. And that's the way the clerks, both the clerks, have run that office. That makes a big, big difference. So I've seen a good job, and I don't know if this board that I applied for meets annually. What do they do? Have there been complaints?
Kelly might know.
I don't recall ever convening this board when I was working for Janice.
You might be like a Maytag repairman. It'll be kind of lonely.
So it's an easy job.
Won't
Okay,
be 12 hours a day.
okay.
We can
But you
assure
may need a
of
lot of
that.
donuts and coffee and, just to keep up.
Coffee I can handle.
You can come hang out and we can see your smiling face.
Okay, thank you.
It seems like some of the people's complaints maybe end up as letters to the editor, kind of a thing in our community. Maybe they
Perhaps.
don't make it to the election board.
They don't make it official.
I guess if I had a suggestion, it's not for how the office is run, but somehow trying to get the electorate to pay attention to simple instructions. Really do color in that little thing instead of putting a random mark somewhere.
And sign your name.
I know it's-
Printed.
I know it's not your job, but just getting
But
people to show up.
Getting the message out to the voters that there are simple instructions, that it really is important and it makes things go smoother. It's something I know the clerks both have struggled with, have worked on. And it'll make them go more smoothly. It'll mean the judges have an easier time. There'll be fewer adjudications to deal with.
See, that's a physics problem. If they're not filling in the dot correctly, perhaps you could give them a pen with a larger nib and a targeting device of some
Well,
sort.
they can use a big marking pen, and even if it bleeds through, it won't change the ballot.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for
Mike.
coming in.
All right,
Great to
bye-bye.
see you.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, and now we're ahead of schedule now, but Peter's here. Come on up, Peter. We'll keep things moving here.
Hi, Peter.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Good to see you.
Yes.
Welcome.
Here.
Charlotte, give us
So,
the,
Yeah, Peter's applied for the APSHA board, and the city is aware that he's applied with us, and I think they're working. I don't know if you've heard from them or not, but it will require a interview with the council as well. But right now, he's here for you to interview, and I don't have any other applicants for this board at this time.
Is the time frame closed?
It did.
And it's the joint seat? Joint city-county
It
seat.
is.
The alternate.
The alternate.
Yeah, the alternate joint.
got it. Okay. Anything you want to say about your arrival before us here in your application before we ask questions?
I don't think so. I'm happy to be here and happy to apply, and just looking forward to answering any questions.
Patty?
Yeah, I have one. Well, first of all, thank you. We love it when people come in and we get to talk with them about volunteering. We depend on our volunteers to help us out with making decisions and moving things forward. But my question for you is, how brave are you?
I was thinking walking over here, it doesn't make you the most popular person in town probably to be on the APSHA board necessarily. And it's probably a difficult position, but I'm interested in the topic and I care about the community, and I feel like this is kind of the board that really has an impact on the community as a whole. So when you ask how brave, I'm certainly open to having difficult conversations and keeping the interest of the community, best interest of the community in mind on the board.
And this board has, as you said, very difficult decisions, but they also put in a lot of time and energy reading, absorbing information, asking easy questions and tough questions. And the alternates, I think the board appreciates when alternates are in attendance, so they're kind of kept up to speed if, in case they're needed to vote. And so I think it's important to, because I was an alternate on planning and zoning many, many years ago, and I went to every meeting because you never knew when they needed me there. And they needed me more often than I thought, so I always had to be prepared. But yeah, it's a busy board, so if you're like busy and you like being brave, this is a good board for you. But yeah, I appreciate your coming forward. Thank you.
Thanks.
Kelly?
Hi, Peter.
Hi, Kelly.
We don't spend a lot of time together in person, but I know you to be a studied person of housing in the community and broader, and so I appreciate that you have dove into the subject more than many other community members, so thank you for applying. I'm curious as to what do you think about what APSHA's focus has been in the recent? So we've, that board has, which I sit on, has taken on the subject of right sizing and the subject of, helping with internal capital improvements. We continue to sort of push staff to elevate on the work plan the broader capital repairs program that we haven't sort of tackled, that kind of got set aside in the past. And I'm just curious if you think, are we on the mark with those priorities? Are there other priorities that you would like the APSHA board to be putting in their work plan?
Honestly, I know that there's a lot I don't know that APSHA is working on and doing. I went through the last 3 agendas and minutes and realized there's a whole host of issues, and so I don't think I'm in a position really to say.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just was curious if you're not seeing things that you would like to see elevated. Yeah.
Not at this time, yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Steve?
So
I feel like that means we're on the right track. I'll take that as a win.
you have a good resume in terms of construction and sort of real estate and property management sort of issues, which I think would be very helpful for someone serving on the APSHA board. How do you see that you could use the skills and knowledge that you have gotten over the years in your career? How would that help you on this board?
I think it gives me some technical skills in understanding the issues, a little bit of the jargon, and the broader context, housing from people to buildings to development, although I know that's not the purview of the board, but just to kind of understand the whole picture. So I hope, I studied urban planning, environmental design in college, and that's kind of where I got my passion for community planning and housing. So I really enjoy the subject, and I think it's critical to the community. The longer I'm here, the more I think that the health of our community really is directly tied to the success of APSHA. I was looking at APSHA by the numbers, and I think there are over 5,000 residents in APSHA, which is more than Snowmass Village, more than the town of Basalt. So we have a large community within APSHA.
And also just looking at your volunteer work in the community, serving on a variety of different boards is very commendable, and I thank you for everything you've done up to this point.
Thank you. I know you all do a lot on your board here.
I wanted to ask if you keep track of the amount of housing that we actually have, because we have APSHA, and we all talk about APSHA, but we also know several other entities have housing. The county has housing, in the city, and the hospital, and the schools that may not be part of the APSHA programs. Do you have a grip, or does anybody have a grip on how much housing that actually exists? You know,
Yeah.
rental or fee simple, that would be deed restricted or dedicated workforce affordable housing?
I don't. I mean, I've been interested in that question, and I've tallied. I think there are 1,000 bedrooms among major employers, which is 400 to 500 units. And then when you start getting into the smaller employers, it's kind of difficult to track. But I've been interested in that question of what is the whole universe of workforce housing, and kind of how is it scattered about the county.
Right, what the mix is. Yeah, I was asked that today, and I said, I don't have an answer to that. I was hoping you did.
We've been wondering about that for a while.
Well, thank you for your application. And tell me, how long have you been in Aspen and coming to Aspen? You've considered yourself a resident since what, 2007 maybe?
Yes, yeah.
But then you've been coming much longer. We have some history.
Yeah.
Which we discovered last year.
Yeah, that's great. I was fortunate. My grandparents built a house, 1,500 square foot A-frame here in 1967, and was really lucky to come out from the Midwest and grow up skiing here and visiting. And it was a dream to eventually move here, and feel really lucky.
How cool, where was it?
Where was
Was their house?
The A-frame.
Oh, on Waters Avenue.
Oh, over there,
It turned out
great
to be right
neighborhood.
next to my house. Like,
Oh, it's a
one
gr-
vacant lot between.
Oh, really? It's
which
a
now
great
is,
neighborhood. I do have
Fonda
one other
Patterson's house.
question, well, thing.
Yeah.
Seeing that you worked for John Silich, you are brave. I've known John forever. And you teach at Snowmat? Where do you teach?
Oh, I taught at Buttermilk for a few years. It was great. It was a lot of fun.
Great, good for you. So you've been out there, and you were involved with WeCycle, which is one of, I think, our favorite organizations here.
Their 11th season just kicking
know,
off
I
now,
know.
and I was texting with Mirta today. How much it's grown is really impressive. Kinda
Seeing the bikes all the way up
valley-wide.
and down the valley, up and down 82 in the valley, it's been really exciting to see.
Yeah.
You see him gone in the morning and back at night when you're coming and going. So it's really amazing what she's done. It's a great group.
I didn't meet Peter back then, but I wanted to share that when his parents had a house on Water Street, it was their vacation home. It was a little chalet, and it looks tiny, right? By Aspen standards, it is. Your grandparents, so your parents grew up going there, and I met was it your mom or your dad?
My mom, probably.
Your
yeah.
mom, right? But the interesting thing is, your grandfather dated my mother back in Denver in the early 1940s, and so when my mom discovered that this old flame was living right next door, it was really kind of interesting. So anyway, and then the other part of it, I'll add to that, is that when we were building the house between yours and mine, I worked for Kevin Cassidy, who was the masonry contractor, and I was the assistant hod carrier to the first hod carrier, who was Tommy Clapper.
I was going to say you were.
Tommy and I worked together when I was like 14. That was my first
Boy, I'm
job.
learning a lot
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, so anyway,
I do have one more question of
Don't you have to
related
back
to
to the
that.
serious part. So I may have to recuse myself.
I don't have
My
any old
husband
flames
didn't
that
date your
live,
mother,
you know, I
so-
met my husband like immediately when I moved here, so no old flames.
The thing is, we assign a number system in Aspen. You know, there's your -1 and your -2. It just makes it much easier.
I just love that neighborhood. The Waters
But I do have a
neighborhood is-
question, really, seriously. I'm curious, so if you live in APSHA housing or not, with our recent change in the board at the city, I think there's a better balance of folks. It was mostly folks living in APSHA, and now we have a bit of more of a dispersed board between APSHA and non-APSHA housing. So I'm just curious which side of that distribution.
I
you
live
fall on.
in town here in a free market apartment
Okay, good to know.
since 2013.
Next to Greg? No, Greg's not.
No, I don't know where he lives.
Or you work for Kevin Cassidy, who lives up the pass. I'm so confused.
Yeah, no, that was back in the 70s, so we don't have to go back that far. But thank you. That's all I have.
Yeah, it was great.
You know,
Nice
We've
to
seen
see
each
you.
other before.
we'll be making a decision and getting back to you in the next 3 weeks.
And I'll
the
reach
city
out
has
to the
to
city.
And the city has to
Because I
interview 'em,
think they're going through interviews with other boards right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I'll
great.
just remind them that you need to
They're much
get it.
easier than we are.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Cheers,
Thanks for
Peter.
coming.
Now, can we
Okay,
take,
it's break time, folks. Let's,
perfect.
we're 11 minutes ahead of schedule.
thank you, I appreciate that.
So why don't we meet again at 3? Is that
She's been a
okay?
good girl. Don't trip over her leash.
Or a little after?
She's been a good girl. You a good girl? Your mama's a good girl? Yeah.
Okay, we're back with our Tuesday work session on May 2nd, 2023. It's 3 o'clock, so we're about 15 minutes ahead of schedule, but our plan is to do review of future agenda calendars, and
Oh, we
Kara's
don't
not
have
here.
Phyllis here.
Maybe we are a little jumping the gun here. Is there anything else we can, should we do board open discussion before we go to future agendas? Because I don't have any either to talk about. But
Oh, I can share something with, just real quick with Greg. The Public Health Board retreat, I have doctor's appointments with Tommy, and then 2 of them that late morning, so I won't be able to attend, and then I'm gonna go on to the airport open house. I don't know if anybody else is planning to go. I'm just gonna have a presence there as soon as I'm done with doctor's appointments.
got it, okay, that's the 11th. The
Yeah.
11th is a crazy day because there's a Board of Health retreat, the airport open house,
There's something else.
CC4CA, and I think the Rawapa Summit is the same day. So,
How thin can you spread yourself?
yeah, I'm cutting 3 ways here or more. So I'm gonna have to sort that out.
Well, you can go to the doctor's appointments, and I'll go
I'll
to
do the
boardhouse.
doctor's appointment. So we can sort out who goes
Okay.
where.
We're just talking about the 11th. There's like a lot of
Multiple,
stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go to the airport the airport open house after I do 2 doctor's appointments with Tommy.
And then I've got Rawapa Summit and Board of Health meeting. I'm chairing the Board of Health meeting, or at least part of the meeting, part of the retreat. So that's where I'll be, and so Rawapa's left open, but maybe somebody on staff or maybe somebody will go do that, or I could abdicate from the Board of Health that day.
I'm supposed to have a little family vacation that weekend. Sorry, I'm supposed to have a little family
No,
time
okay.
that weekend, but I wonder if we could check in with Healthy River staff and see if anyone plans. to attend that, because
That would be
good
great,
idea.
great idea.
on there, the whole,
We
the
have to
whole
talk to Lisa.
watershed plan and everything, and that collaborative that's been reignited has been on their radar.
You're going to check water use in the far reaches of Nevada, is my
Yeah,
understanding?
that's right. I'm going to see how they conserve water in Vegas.
What kind of grass they're growing?
Yeah, I was planning on
visit
going
a
to
friend of
that
mine.
watershed summit on May 11th
Right,
also.
but for the full day or just part of it? 'Cause
Well,
if
as
you're
much
there,
of it
then
as I
we're covered.
can.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of it is actually stuff that I'm familiar with, but if you went, that would
Yeah.
be great. So we'll get it sorted out.
So you still need a staff person for Ruwapa?
If
Well,
Steve's
Steve
going,
might go, but it'd be nice to
Oh.
have a staffer there. CC4CA Policy Committee, I don't think we need to go to that. I find their policy committee to be really parsing sentences, and it's a group thing. They need a full 100% approval to get
Right.
anything to pass, and they're going through the commas and
Right.
periods, and I'm the wrong one for that. So we can skip that one. So I think we're okay. Well, now that we've got Phyllis back, you're back. See, you came back.
I am back.
Should we do future agendas and then?
You know, I have nothing in future agendas. There was nothing for me to share.
Anybody else?
I just
Kelly?
would note that it mentions the APSHA retreat is like in June, but I think it's actually being scheduled for July 19th.
Oh, it might have been on a
Yeah.
agenda earlier.
Yeah, so that can come off
Okay.
for now. And I will say the Redstone STR, there's like big posters put out in Redstone advertising that.
And I've heard it on the radio and I've seen ads. Yeah, so that's good.
and when is that one?
2 Thursdays, the 18th, I think.
Make sure I,
So on the STRs, I can participate in the Redstone STR and the general STR discussion, but I will be recused when we're talking about STRs in rural and remote.
Okay.
Just so you all know.
Right.
And I don't think that will probably come up at the Redstone meeting, but might possibly.
It's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, it seems that today's not the day to go into any detail here on that. Do we want to go back to open discussion? Anything else?
I'll just say, it was reported in the paper, but we had an excellent meeting in Marble last
it was
Thursday.
good reporting though, I thought.
Really good reporting. It was even in the Colorado Sun. We had expected around 50 people, and there was 140 people.
Great.
And,
How'd they fit in that space?
It's pretty big.
Oh, really?
It's
You
a
know,
big,
they-
like a quadruple bay.
Big? Wow.
Yeah.
Firehouse bay.
Yeah, so they brought in, they were hauling in chairs and tables for the first half hour of it for sure. But they had plenty of food for everybody, and
Wow, that's great.
the facilitators pivoted and handled a group that size and did a really great job. And so the next sort of work of that group is figuring out the kind of about a 30-person steering committee who's really going to dive into the issues based on the folks that all expressed interest.
I still find and found Zane Kessler's comments of interest.
It is an issue, you know. I was asked by reporters, "Oh, what's Picken County's profile in this? Picken County's always wanted wild and scenic. Is this a foregone conclusion?" And I've said, "Well, Picken County tried it on our own in the past, and we didn't make headway. And we know we have to work with the community on solutions. So even though that's what our constituents want, and that's what we'll continue to support our constituents in, we also have to be open to what the broader conversation is."
I think Ron Leach's comments were good.
He's so good.
I know. When you get Ron Leach on your side, you're going somewhere.
Ah, he's just lovely.
He's a great guy.
So at
Steve
the,
has
go
any
ahead.
thoughts? He was-
Yeah, follow up on that meeting. The food was from the Redstone General Store, and it was amazing. It was just so good.
Oh, that's what Steve has to say about this.
And there was enough food. There were 138 people there or whatever, and they were planning for 50, but there was plenty of food for everybody. They did a really good job.
Maybe we should have more meetings at the fire station in Redstone.
So I had some interesting conversations, but one of my high school classmates from the year behind me at Basalt High School was there.
I'm not kidding.
Al Arlian, who the Fields project down below Elgibel and Blue Lake, that was their family farm there, the Arlian place. So that's where he grew up in this old Italian farmhouse there on that farm. And our families were just best of friends all through high school. So he has bought a lot at the bottom of Coal Basin Road and built a house there, and he lives there now. He's retired from his career as an engineer. It was just great seeing him, and
Cool.
that was special to me.
Awesome. Yeah, we had a real broad representation of people, so that was good.
I just heard a news story, and I'm going back to look. I don't know if it's the conduit. Is it Coyote Gulch? It's the expansion of the capacity of the Arkansas to take more water to the southeastern part of the Front Range, and they're going to pull it from the Roaring Fork and the Frying Pan, and we already have 60% of the water from the Roaring Fork is diverted to the Front Range, and it looks like they're going to come and get another 20% more, perhaps, or maybe more. I'm not sure what the number is, but we haven't talked much about that, and I'm not sure there's a lot we can do. But I think we should get maybe have John Ely at some point apprise us of just what's happening, because it's in the news. All of a sudden they have the bandwidth to take more water from us, and they're so excited to come and get it. And I haven't heard any response from the western slope or any of the water users to the west, as far as the Pacific, who might have an interest in that. So I'm hoping to bring it back, and we can get some understanding of what's happening. Can we do anything? Does the water belong to them? And it's just a foregone conclusion. It's not going to be flowing.
Where are they
through our
going to
valley.
take it from?
Upper Frying
North
Pan and
side.
Roaring Fork.
So is that part of the FRIARC agreement?
FRIARC and
It's the Northside Collection System.
Yeah, but that was supposed to originally go to use for agricultural purpose in the San Luis Valley,
So
for the federal documents.
I think that the Colorado Division of Water Resources should declare all conditional water rights abandoned at this point, because there is no more
Water.
extra water. There just isn't. The streams are all over adjudicated already.
And my position, if you want to grow, figure out how to get your own water. Don't take it from us.
Yeah, because that's just going to make the situation worse in the whole Colorado basin if they divert one more drop of water.
Yep.
So I don't know if there's anything legal we can do about it, but I think we should take it to the Colorado Supreme Court or something to try to stop this thing based on Colorado water law somehow.
Can you elevate that to John Ely's
Yeah,
attention?
I'm sending him the article that I just found, which is February 21st. For some reason I didn't see it, but it's been in the news much more recently than that, and it was on Colorado Public Radio or maybe Colorado Sun. So I will alert John and send you all the article, and maybe we can get a report on it, because I think when people learn what's happening, we're going to have some real very upset people on the western slope. Okay, thank you. That's all I had. Steve?
Let's see, I've got two things. One, we had our first meeting of the EDI committee, the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, which there's people from nearly every, maybe perhaps every department in the county has a representative there. So we just had a 1-hour meeting to take our first look at the report and do a little bit of editing on the report from the consulting firm. But then next week, we're gonna have 2 days, like 8 hours of meetings total. And on the Wednesday meeting, they're gonna start it earlier so I can be there for more of the time before coming to our meeting here.
Great. Thanks for doing this.
And they might be meeting right next door here, or maybe upstairs or somewhere on Wednesdays, so I'll be close by to duck out of there and come in here.
And the next QQ meeting, I guess, is scheduled here? Did you guys?
It's in the valley, right?
It's at our library. They just asked me if they could use my library card to book the room. I said, yes, but
It was nice of them to ask.
yeah.
I didn't realize.
They were like, we knew you'd have a library card.
That's funny.
I'm like, okay.
Also, one other thing, I finished drawing out a fourth alternative way to do the commissioner redistricting. And that will be in the packet for next week. I've actually got the map here if anyone wants to look at it ahead of time. I'm amazed at the job that our staff did in coming up with the other 3 proposals, because it's tricky to using the census blocks, which have these little tiny numbers on the map, to even figure out what the population of each of the census blocks is. And then to take all the things, it's like doing a puzzle where you're trying to move these pieces around and have the numbers come out right so it meets the statutory requirements. But anyhow, I'm happy with my proposal's not perfect, but I don't think any of them are, and so I look forward to talking about it next week at our work session next week. And if anyone wants to look at it, I've got the map here. I'm going to leave it up on my desk for Lauren from the GSI department to come and pick it up.
And
Great.
I missed that meeting, but I've watched it, and I'm meeting with Ryan maybe tomorrow just to go through some things. So I'll be up to speed. Thank you guys
That's
for.
right. You weren't here, so we eliminated your district.
That's right. But I'm getting the paycheck. I just don't have to come to work anymore. You know what? I'm glad I wasn't here that day.
Okay, that seems to be it for open discussion. Future agendas. Just to put on the notes in the calendar, we do have the Corps' discussion regarding the coal basin sites. Will be Monday, May 8th at 6 p.m. at the 3rd Street Center. An update from Corps and from Delta Brick and Climate, the contractor, on that, about developments in coal basin regarding mitigating methane, fugitive methane there. So that's the next update. And maybe we'll see people down there. And with that, I can declare this work session over.
Thank you. Good
Thank you,
job.
grassroots, and thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks, Francie, for letting me drive. Talk to you later.
Great. Thanks.
McKellar.